We're working with the request library and the beautiful soup library to pull data from web pages directly from the HTML. And in class, we went over a little bit of HTML and CSS to understand the structure of web pages and how we can use this to our advantage to gather data. So the last video went over a few steps that involved sending a request to Epicurious using a specified URL, and we used the keywords apple pie, and we got a response back, and then we took that response, here it is, and grabbed the content. We made that the first argument of this beautiful soup function, which takes that content and parses it, so it essentially makes some sense out of it, puts it into a data structure that resembles a tree, an XML tree. And this is what we work with. So now that we have that object, we can do some things to it. We can use some functions, and here are some examples of functions that are contained in the Beautiful Soup library, or BS4 library. Generally, they all have to do with tags, attributes, and classes. And I should say that a class is a specific type of attribute that's very common. Classes are used to style a web page, so they essentially connect a very specific, usually a very specific element on a page to some sort of style. And we take advantage of this in scraping data. So for example, we saw a few of these in class. H4 is an example of a tag, P is an example of a tag, and then a class is a common type of attribute that we specify. So whatever we say class equals something, and that thing is in quotes, and that's a term that we define. We decide what that is, so that we can then reference it over here in our CSS and make it look however we want to, change the font, the line height, and all of that. And then we also have other kinds of attributes, and the one that we looked at most closely was the href, which involves links. So tags, classes, attributes are important things to keep in mind as we're going through these functions. So the find function is going to find the first matching child tag within some object. So that takes in an argument of a tag name and an attribute value. The find all is going to find all matching child tags. So when we say child tags, we're talking about elements within the larger element, and that looks like, so for example, if I have an A tag, a child element of this A tag that's highlighted here would be the div. Anything contained or nested within. So the child element of this div with a class name PhotoWrap has a div inside of it, and that's the child. With a class name component lazy image loaded, has several class names actually. And then we continue to see the child elements nested within these tagged elements here. So that's what we're referring to when we're talking about these functions. So the other useful function that we'll see is the getText function, and that has to be used with an element that actually contains some text for it. So for example, this one right here, the P tag, paragraph tag, contains some text, and we can see that it's highlighted, and that's the stuff that's showing up on the page. So those functions are very useful. These other functions we're not going to use so much, these four, this one, about the ones about parents and descendants, but you should know that they're there. There's a lot more you can do with the Beautiful Soup library. And this right here is just to remind us how important let's run this, make it look better. href attribute that's going to show up over and over again. So here we are using some of these functions. I'm going to define an object called all a tags, and I'm going to look in the results page. So that results page is really, it's containing everything on the page. So within that object, I'm going to find all a tags, the a is in quotes, and I'm going to print the type, and I'm going to print the output and see what that looks like. Okay, so first I'll just notice the type is BS4 element result set. So a result set is a collection of elements. In this case, it's a collection of a tags. So I can see that it's a list. See by the brackets that it is a list, and the elements are separated by commas. That's important because some of the functions require a certain data type. So for example, the find all has to, and the find has to be applied to a string. And we see that here. So we could not use the find function with this result set. We couldn't use it with this list, it won't work. We can find, let's use the find function to find the first div on the page. And its class name is header wrapper, so I could probably even find that. One thing I can do is I can type in Control F, and I could type in that header wrapper. So here we have the first div tag on the page. So that contains all of this stuff up here that's highlighted. So that's the first section. Okay. So it's, as you can see, it's important to move back and forth between our code and the page that we're actually trying to scrape. And notice that this has, if we look at the type of this object, it's called BS4 element, and it is in fact a tag. And it's a string. This is actually a string. So within this string object, we could again use the find function. So this is called applying functions recursively. So we can continue to apply them to our objects that we've created. So what this will do is it'll take the object that we just created from the first div tag, and from within that, we'll see if we can find an a tag, and we do. Let's look at the page and see where that's coming from. It's maybe this one. Maybe it's that one right there. Yeah, it looks like that's it. Okay, so as I said, we can't do, we can't reference the all a tags object because it's a list, and we can't use the find function on the list. So the next part of this is an exercise to see if you can follow the same steps, but for a different web page, for the stock web page, which should be this page right here if we use Apple as our symbol, which I recommend, because then you'll know your output is going to be the same as everyone else's and you can check your work. So here's the page that you'll be looking at, and you'll treat it just like we did the Epicurious page. You can inspect, and you can try to get specific items. I think what I asked us to do is to find all the a tags, find all div tags, and then find a tags within a div tag. This should actually be one div. There we go, to make it resemble what we did before. So I'll stop there, and I would recommend you give that a try.